You're All So Glorious, Chapter 2. Pray, I think. Part 1. I think I am a link recycled in a very perfect chain. Content warnings, cannibalism, child abuse, body horror, mild drug usage, mild misgendering, racism. The child abuse and body horror, um, it gets bad. Uh, it, yeah. When she was 7 years old, lace was stolen from West Africa. So, it begins. From somewhere along the long southern coast that teases the shore with playful laps of white foam and weighs the inland down with sprawling lagoons and spring-like rivers. She doesn't know from which country. Her mother never told her, and Lace had never asked for fear the question would translate to ungratefulness. She possessed a desperate fear of being sent back, sent away, and discarded. Turn the music down slightly. Lace's only memory of the place she was born, only memories of the place she was born are vague but warm. She remembers sitting in front of a bright sapphire wall, petting the olive grass with one hand. To her left is a basketball court, occupied by some teenagers. They're frozen in her memories, preserved mid-throw. Black and orange ball half-arced in the air like the lofty stairs. Their faces are blurs, mere silhouettes blocked by the sun setting just over their heads. The step Lace sat on was a little uneven, but she'd bore the annoyance to poke at a furry spider that had crept its way out of the darkness. It had looked silly to her, all fuzzy and slow, with a dozen eyes and 27 legs warped through her childlike vision. It had waved its little front claws ahead of itself, carefully inching its way across the concrete. She'd laid out a finger so it might crawl upon her. The spider had chosen to bite her instead. It sunk its tiny fangs into the little finger, and Lace had screamed, jumping back and wailing her damn head off. Her finger had throbbed, pulsing badly, and she'd instinctively stuck it in her mouth, sucking in hope that the pain might taper off. The boys had come running, abandoning the basketball, and Lace had always thought one might have been her brother, because he carried her off in his arms, holding her tight, holding her close. She'd gotten sick for a while, but she'd recovered. In her childhood, there were warm meals and a smooth, deep voice singing her lullabies, and a few miles away was an ocean, as wide to Lace and her tiny fingers as the night sky is far. It twisted and pulled smooth white stones in its grasp, revealing them from the golden sand like an oyster with a pearl. Lace had grasped at them and sought not to let them go. Lace doesn't remember her birth parents well, just a vague impression of someone who rocked her to sleep. Nor does she truly remember if she'd had any siblings. Just at some point, their presence had stopped appearing in her memory. She's pretty sure they died. She can't remember. She never would. She also doesn't remember if she'd sat in a children's village and waited there for the slim chance of adoption, or if she'd been taken from her home as a vulnerable orphan and sold right into a trafficking ring. If this is the case, her luck in being bought by someone like Mother had been immeasurable. For about a year, Lace had lived somewhere she'd prefer not to remember. Sometimes she was put in a dress, ill-fitting and unflattering, and she would be paraded in front of a bunch of men and women, gazes as sharp as they would be if they had been inspecting livestock. Tuck a smile on your face, and Lace had, smiling with all her teeth. She learned that smiling would get her dinner, often no more than a bowl of vegetable soup or instant oatmeal, but better than nothing at all. While frowning would get her placed in a dark room. Able to understand things quickly and understand things well, she becomes adept at this new life, blinking with big eyes and twisting her fingers around the ribbon that tied her dress together. Would she have smiled as big as she had if she'd known where she was going? Perhaps, It depends on how much of the future she would get to know. Her time in this dark and dirty place had come to an abrupt end when a man in a suit had come into the building one day, a set of needles in a little box. Each female child was presented to them, told if they did not behave, they'd get no dinner for a week. He stabbed each of them right through the inner elbow with one of his silver needles, tipped in a strange white substance. When Lace came up, she stuck out her arm and stared sternly at the wall when the needle went through her skin. The man pauses. She is not sure what he saw. She didn't look. "This one," he calls, raising his voice a bit. "She'll do." "Right away, sir," says one of the facilitators. And that had been that. Later that day, Lace had been shoved into a newer, just as ill-fitting dress, fluttering prettily with ivory ribbons, and placed on a plane for the first time in her entire life. Oh no. Just like that, Lace had left her home and was bound elsewhere. Lace remembers she didn't like the food on the plane, despite her stomach gnawing in anger. She'd gagged, but she'd forced herself to swallow every bite when the flight attendants had laid a dull-looking tray in front of her with stale breads and watery fruits. The seat had been too sticky on her back. Her dress had been itchy and far too tight, her bow slipping slowly out of place. It had been far too cold, and her ears had clogged up unnaturally. Pinching her nose, she'd found that exhaling really hard made them pop back to normal. She'd done this a few times before the man she was traveling with, the one carrying all the silver needles, a tall white man wearing a pristine suit, had given her a disdainful look. "You'll bust your eardrums," he says. "Doing that, we'll have to send you back if you're deaf." Lace does not want to be sent back, since she is not sure what else she is not supposed to do. She grips her tulle skirt with both hands and stares at the back of the seat in front of her for the rest of the plane ride. Arriving in the Paris airport is a shock. The airport is utterly luxurious, sloping ceilings, glittering floors, and flights upon flights of stairs with neat and precise luxury logos. Restaurants organized themselves separately, boasting tables adorned with neat white tablecloths and small glass vases with red carnations caught in mid-bloom. Scents drifted through the air. Expensive perfumes and fried food and wax polish, paced over by dozens of people at a time, each lost in their own world, unaware of Lace glancing around with sparkling eyes. The luxury is intense. She wishes to explore, running her childish hands upon the silken blouse posed still upon a looming mannequin. Open a soft-covered book with a pair of animals upon it and a rhyming English title. But the man tugs her away, and while she looks over her shoulder longingly, Lace thinks that perhaps she would get these things wherever she was going. Perhaps she alone lived in the dark, and all the rest of the world lived in this giant manor, this palace of rooms and consumption. Why is this... Fuck! Along the way through, the man buys her a bag of potato chips and a pepperoni and prosciutto sandwich warmed within a metal tray. "It's better not to have an empty stomach for this," he grunts, momentarily furrowing his eyebrows like he is ashamed. Lace is hungry enough that she hardly hears him. She rips into the sandwich with gusto. Her fingers get greasy. She devours the food with big choking bites, so large they burn her mouth and bring tears to her eyes. She doesn't wish to stain her pretty new dress, so she holds her hands out in front of her, watching the lights glisten off the juices, until the man hands her a napkin. Lace remembers this brief, beautiful moment through a haze. The lights dazzled her eyes. She doesn't know where she is, but she thinks she'd like to come back. She remembers it well as the man leads her out of the airport. After this, Lace is deposited into a car, gleaming black and polished, leather seats much nicer than had been within the plane. The man says, "Take her quickly," and then shuts the door. He strides through the crowded airport streets before disappearing into a crowd of people. Lace does not see him ever again. The car ride has her feeling a bit more nervous. The departure of the first man had unstabilized her. There had first been the place she'd dwelled within for the past few months, and then the man had come for her. The man had taken her out to somewhere new, but she'd still had the man, a weak connection to where she had grown up. Now, though, there is no man, and an unfamiliar environment. Building sweeping by in looming grays, and people sweeping by in a blur of color. They emerge from the city within the slow crawl of traffic. The tall buildings start only appearing in clusters, and then spreading out with distinction, becoming individual monoliths that rarely surpass the height of a passing bush. There are few trees, but the ones placed seem almost deliberate, planted to provide roadside decoration, or shading pastoral homes stained with black mold and framed by crumbling grey fences. The rest of the landscape is flat and green, rolling out to the horizon. Lace spends the entire car ride, nose pressed right up against the glass. She's breathless with fear and uncertainty. In some ways, the grass, the sun, the sky, France is exactly like the place she had just left. In many others, it is not. Eventually, the car pulls up to a building, flat and short in the front, but with a few extra stories that appear to have been tacked on post-construction. There's a white cross sign pinned to the brown brick, exaggerated with a cherry-red backdrop. There's a blue awning over a paved cul-de-sac to drop off patients in front of the hospital, but the driver maneuvers the car to a side entrance, passing by the main entrance and instead ducking behind machinery and wearing fans, parking beside a white door, windowless and without an access handle. As the car hums to life, a woman emerges from the door, dressed in bright blue scrubs, holding a wooden clipboard. Another woman holds the door behind her, preventing the first woman from accidentally getting locked out. "We're here to get her tested," the driver says through a cracked window as the nurse approaches. Jerking a thumb back to Lace, she immediately sits up a little straighter. Signator should have called ahead. "Another one?" the woman complains. "This must be the fifth one in as many months." "You complaining about the extra pay?" The woman rolls her eyes, opening the back door to where Lace is seated. "You'd have to be crazy. Come on, girl, maybe you'll be the one to get lucky." Uncertain, Lace tries to lean away, but the nurse just sighs, unbuckling the seatbelt and gripping Lace by the upper arm. "We've got to run some tests," she says gently. "We're not going to hurt you, but there are a couple of quick vaccines and such we've got to give you. Then you can see your new mummy and go eat yummy food and live in a big, big house. Would you like that?" Her voice is childish, trying hard to be sweet and coaxing, but just ending up as grating. Lace shrinks away, shaking her head. With her other hand, she tries to pry off the nurse's vice grip. The nurse's face turns a little stormy. "How about this?" she says, voice harsher. Hold on Lace's arms a little meaner. "You don't get out, we send you back. You think anyone will miss you? Be rational, girl. This is the best opportunity you're ever going to get." Lace thinks of the place she had come from, the dark rooms within which she'd spent hungry hours poring over shoddy French textbooks and outdated arithmetic at the command of the man in charge. They had told her she was the most attractive child. They told her she would go for a lot if they found the right buyer. It would be good for the both of them. Good for Lace, because she would be with a rich family, and good for the people, because they would get money. When it comes to wealth, not much consideration is spared for anything else. Lace doesn't want to go back. France is terrifying, but she thinks the dark is worse. Slowly, Lace relents, unfurling her limbs reluctantly, like a taut pillbug, before stepping out of the car herself. There's a glint in the nurse's eye she doesn't like, but as Lace looks around at the surrounding area, thickly packed stores and businesses, cobblestone and asphalt jarringly placed together, the unfamiliarity prevents her from running. So she follows the nurse into the hospital. "That's it," the nurse says, squinting into the sun as Lace takes a few tentative steps towards the goal. "Door? Good girl." The other woman sighs as Lace finally crosses the threshold. Hey! Calls the driver from behind them. "You still owe me a few packs of cigarettes and some euros from the last time I came over here. You can't ignore me forever." The driver doesn't manage to get the entire sentence out before the side door thuds behind the nurse. Lace stares at the heavy grey metal. "Damn man," she says to the other woman who had been holding the door for her. "Never lets anything go. Maybe I'll pay him back with the next girl he brings along." Both women look down at Lace and then back at each other. They laugh, a pair of stifled bird whistles, like two wind chimes hanging from a roof. Lace is led down a dingy-looking corridor, comprised of sputtering lights and grey cinder block walls. The woman clatter vaguely over her head. Things about so-and-so's love life, their dismal pay, what's going on at their children's school. They seem to hold no regard for the eeriness of the area, pacing through double swinging doors and making turns seemingly at random. Sorry about that. In comparison to the hallway, the room they finally bring Lace into is remarkably clean and modern, almost blinding in intensity. Lace looks around, dazed. Dazed. She is directed to sit on a leathery bench covered with a paper sheet that crinkles when she cautiously descends onto it. One of the nurses washes her hands, douses them with hand sanitizers, and then stretches a pair of blue disposable gloves over them. "Get the doctor," she says to the other. "Silk likes quick results. Maybe we'll glean a bit more cash out of her if we're snappy." She picks up a bottle and a syringe. The other woman leaves. "All right, darling," the remaining woman says. Her voice is syrupy. She approaches with the vial, sticking the syringe inside and pulsing the contents a few times. "We're going to put you under. It'll be all right. Can you open your mouth to the count of 3? 1, 2. She sticks the syringe between Lace's lips, right between her lower gum and cheek. A liquid slowly drains within her mouth. When Lace jolts in surprise, the woman grips her harshly with her free hand and snaps a swear at her. "I don't understand," Lace finally says when the woman releases her, first in her own language and then in stuttering French, intimidated by the unfamiliar accent. I want to go home." She doesn't experience a sense of unconsciousness, more than she experiences a bleeding sensation, a warping of her childhood into this new locale. The sapphire wall turns into the white of a hospital room. The grass on the hand becomes a cold, papery sheet. The boys playing basketball turn into the ambivalent and apathetic hospital staff. Lace is so young she doesn't know what to hold on to, what memories are best forgotten so she doesn't hurt so much, and what memories should be cradled close so that she can have a warm blanket to hold on cold nights. So it goes. When Lace awakes, her forearm hurts viciously. Her mouth is dried, like someone had swept up all the saliva within it, and her head pounds with exhaustion. She blinks the crust from her eyes. She's in an entirely different room now. There's a different layout. There's a different nurse, who is replacing an empty glove box. Lace stares at her with entreating eyes, hoping fruitlessly the nurse would notice her awareness through her stare alone. There's a steady beeping next to Lace that begins to increase in pace as she gains awareness. This proves to be a far more effective method to gain the nurse's attention, as she glances up at the noise, eyes becoming more sharp when she sees Lace's awareness. "Water," Lace croaks, begs, really. Please, water, please. The nurse takes a plastic bottle and cups the drink to her lips. She then takes Lace's blood pressure and temperature before switching out a bag of fluid that had been needled into her skin. Lace is too weak to panic about that. Then she takes Lace by the wrist, forcing her hand forward, palm up. Just above Lace's wrist is the zigzag of a white patchwork. Where there had once been dark skin, there is now a large patch of white, extending from her elbow to the tip of her palm. Weakened from her unconsciousness, Lace hadn't the strength to notice it until then. What is that? Lace gasps. The nurse takes her finger and prods down on Lace's skin. Wrist, then skin, gives, unnaturally, folding into itself like there are no veins or arteries, no meat and no flesh to keep Lace's skin taut. Lace's chest heaves. This is normal after surgery, the nurse explains, seeing this reaction. You had an infection here, blisteringly bad. We had to cut through some layers of the skin, see? You'll be back to normal in no time. Now, don't cry, no? Here's some water. Here's a sucker. You are very brave. As Lace obediently sucks down the liquid, she finds she cannot cry loudly and drink water at once. But the rim of the water cup still comes away heavily wet with saliva and snot. The sucker is flavored orange. For the next few days, which measure loosely and mindlessly within the time of the sunrise and sunset, Lace spends most of her time sleeping. There are hand sanitizer dispensers, white and wrinkled, next to a stack of blue latex gloves by the room's entry. A black box holds a clipboard and a pen with a pink fluffy keychain dangling from the end. There's a sputtering TV in the corner, the newscaster, a dark-haired man who spoke rapid French. She understands him, but in a childish way. The words coming from his mouth made logical sense, but she does not care for economic embargoes and religious feuds. The world consisted only of her own worries. No expense had been made to expand this viewpoint. For a few days, no one came to visit her except the nurses and doctors in their scrubs and masks and wan smiles. There are three nurses and a single doctor, all of whom check Lace's forearm religiously. Lace is not imminently dying, so they are quick to leave as soon as they give her a medication or tray of food or what have you. A very curated, bland diet and a colorful spread of antibiotics measure time throughout the day. Here's the blue pill, so it must be evening time. Here's the white pill, so it must be morning. Lace has a window, but it looks straight into the brick wall of the building next door. She has a clock, but time's importance becomes redundant when placed through the lens of neon red numbers. She's bored, but she's scared. She's scared of her forearm, which has started to turn dark as her skin heals over the white. It grows hard there, almost calcified, before softening once again to become similar to her own skin. Original skin. Picking at it led her to being yelled at by the nurses, so Lace keeps her hands fisted and to herself. Fear keeps her still in the hospital bed, unmoving. Lace had never been on a plane before, and hadn't been in a hospital either. Surrounded by strangers, she had clammed up, turned grey, and gone mute entirely. Terror, a vague notion in the plane, and more prominent in the car, seizes her heart with a violence.